A 75-member-strong executive is set to be sworn in by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo at the Cape Town International Convention Centre this morning. Returning Deputy President Paul Mashatile is also set to be sworn in today. Bulelani Phillip, part of the SABC News team, watching developments for us. These are live visuals taking place inside the venue where all the action is going to take place. Bulelani, you've been able to speak to a number of ministers as they walk into the venue behind you. Many of them, of course, outlining their priorities given the task that lies ahead.
Well, welcome back again, Ayanda. Of course, the majority of members of cabinet as well as members of the executive have already made their way into the venue to make sense of the developments and this official swearing-in ceremony. I bring into the conversation now political analyst Sanusha Naidu. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. Firstly, for ordinary South Africans, what is the significance of this Government of National Unity Agreement, particularly now that the cabinet and the executive includes other political parties?
Good morning to you and good morning to the viewers. I think it's a very important moment because now we've got a cabinet that has been constituted. The MPs are going to, cabinet members are going to be sworn in. We've got a government that needs to move forward. So next week we're going to see the president together with his cabinet have their first sight of each other, meet, look at each other, kind of get a sense of where they are as a cabinet, as a unified cabinet, hopefully. And more importantly, I think you're beginning to see the DGs handing over reports of where their ministries and portfolios are, particularly for those new ministers that have come in. There's probably also a space for them to also engage on getting a sense of what the exit notes are. I just spoke to the Deputy Minister of Transport, and he says to me that one of the things that he got as the new DM for Transport is five lever arch files from the DG on the portfolio. So these are key things that are going to be deliverables that have to be shown to the new ministers or to ministers that have gone to other portfolios, and to basically see where the policy dynamic is, where the trajectory is, but also bearing in mind that the MTEF will also have to happen, deadlines there. Operation Velendula, we know that Tyrone Seal has been reappointed for 1 year. That happens as well. Decision-making processes, ministers also have to now start assembling their team. So it's quite a lot of things that have to hit the ground running. But I think the big challenge would be for the president to glean from the first cabinet what the kind of mandate it is, the perspective and the policy trajectory that needs to go forward, and bearing in mind as well that the finance minister has an MTEF statement in October.
Sanusha, I'm going to ask you to just hang 10 for a moment there. I just want to speak to the Defense Minister, Njimo Shekha. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. I know you have to make your way into the venue quite shortly. Firstly, congratulations on your appointment. Firstly, your point of call in this new department, because we know your face is synonymous with basic education.
No, thank you very much. It's to go and work with the team, deal with the problems, challenges if they are there. And obviously in every department there will be challenges. Work with the team there to deal with your burning platforms, your immediate, and then on the basis of what was the predecessor will have been coming from the same party, just from the handover report, continue the implementation of that which the presidency, because he's the head of the army, and with his team and the team saying what is it that is urgent, what we need to do.
Some would argue that would you be effective if you don't have the background of the defense?
I'm not a soldier, I'm not going to fight. So I'm the head on policy. I work on the basis of the policies of the governing party, working with a team of experts. So even in education, I was not teaching. I was working at the policy level. So to say I should be in the army as if I was going to be in the classroom, I was not even in the classroom then. But at least perhaps I had an understanding. But here, I really have a sense of what is important for the safety of the country. As I have an advantage of a well-established system. I have the support of the presidents. I've been talking to them as the head of the army, and I feel safe and fine.
So you've had preliminary meetings with some of the generals?
No, we're only going to meet them. I was not the minister. They asked for meetings. I said, but what are you meeting me in my capacity? I can only be a minister after being sworn in. Immediately after the swearing in, we have meetings.
there's quite a few challenges within the defense space, particularly the aging infrastructure, poor financing. Do you have any ideas how you can turn around that situation?
No, fortunately, the Minister of Finance, even the previous 10, had approved a budget for the army. So even after we were appointed, he said to me immediately, after the swearing in, we are going to get a budget. So I also feel very hopeful and excited that we'll deal with some of the financial challenges or challenges which were linked to the finances of the army. So there is a commitment from Treasury.
Before I let you go, you fit for the job? Ready to go?
I am. I mean, I'm always ready for... I've been around. So I've seen it all, I've done it all. So nothing intimidates me at this level. I'm very confident that we'll make it with the team around me.
All right, thank you so much, ma'am. All the best in your new responsibilities. Angie Mochecha, the Defense and Military Veterans Department Minister. Of course, continuing this conversation, political analyst Sanusha Naidu again. Where we left off was that I wanted to ask the fact that the complexity of this GNU agreement, will it necessarily lead to delayed decision-making processes? I take the example that yesterday Parliament had to approve 3 motions, but they were withdrawn because they had to do further consultations with the political parties involved.
I think, Bulelani, that has been one of those caveats, there's one of those challenges that when you have such an expansive cabinet and you have so many different partners who may see things in the way that they want to bring governance and managerial style, the question here is that statement of intent as the foundation. Now, the statement of intent, we see that being challenged or being kind of put to the cog in Gauteng around the interpretation of Clause 16 and so forth. But I think the question then is, once you've established that government of national unity in terms of broad proportionality, what does it mean when it comes to decision-making processes? And I think this is where it's going to be really important to watch whether we're going to see procrastination, whether we're going to see delays, whether we're going to see frustrations, because as you mentioned yesterday in Parliament, the 3 motions were withdrawn, questions were raised about whether there was enough consultation. But I think in the ministries as well, you're going to actually have to find that fit. And what's your organizational fit? You've got new ministers. They're going to bring in advisors. I mean, a minister can bring in 2 or 3 advisors depending on sectorial expertise and so forth in the ministry. But do those advisors then gel with the DGs and all of that? And there's a whole inner sanctum of the minister's office, and then of course there's the ministry. And those are some of the things where you have to find the fit. And so you've got to find the way in which you've got to basically find your ways of communication within the bureaucracy of the ministry. That's one. In Parliament, it's the accountability, the oversight. And so the other question to raise is, if you have committees, I think we have about 26 committees or maybe more, made up of 15 members each. And so this will be interesting in terms of how these committees will be chaired, what will be the decisions when they come to present their policy direction, their trajectory, their focus around where they want to move on social development, on economic cluster, etc. The challenge would be is, will you find more and more discussion and more adversary between the DG and the committee? And also remember now, we're not sure how we articulate the opposition in the country. Is it the MPA that's the official opposition? Is it still the DA? Will the DA still hold their own members accountable? There's a whole lot of stuff that we have to start thinking about in terms of process and substance.
Do these partners who are from the opposition bloc that are within the GNU, do you think they've got enough space to be able to be independent in their identity and also be able to still stick to their policy objectives as they were campaigning during the elections? In other words, would they be able to give a divergent voice within the cabinet?
Well, from a theoretical perspective, that is what it's about, right? It's about, for me, it's about how do you appoint people into the different cabinet posts based on the GNU partnership, but also you bring the meritocracy, you bring the experience, and who's going to deliver an efficient state, an efficient government, and an efficient governance and implementation. So hopefully they do bring that. But I think they are going to face some opposition. They are going to face challenges and difficulties within those ministries. There may be different ways in which, for example, a bureaucracy within a ministry doesn't really find its fit with the new minister. So by the time you establish that trust within the ministry, we may be at that point where we're entering the local government election marathon as well. So these are some of the dynamics where I think that you can't afford to just be sitting and trying to establish what your relationship of interpersonal engagements are. I was listening to some of the ministers talking to each other in the room behind us, and water and sanitation, for example, is an interesting one, because the idea is the minister there and the ministers in human settlements and in other ministries, in COCTA and all of that, have to work together. But you got a sense that, I'm the minister, so you come to me. That's not the attitude. The attitude can't be that. The attitude has to be that you have to be a collective cabinet.
Lastly, do you see this GNU agreement standing the test of time for the next 5 years?
Hopefully, and at the theoretical level, that's what we want. At a practical level, I think the GNU has a very short time frame. I think we've got to look at it in terms of its first 50 days, its next 100 days. We've got to take it in these different time frames broken down in a number of days that we see. And based on that, we've got to see what the evaluation is. I know the President will also be thinking about the individual performance contracts and how that will work. But the one thing that we never saw in the sixth administration, which we need to see much more, is what does consequent management mean? What does the performance and the KPAs mean in terms of holding ministers accountable for the performance of their ministries? Because that has been a key decline, a key deficit in output. And so I think for me, the benchmark is, yes, it's 5 years, but will it last 5 years? I think the big test will be 2026.
I know I said I'm going to ask you the last question, but this question is coming up over and over again. There are people who have been moved from one department to another, and there are people whose strengths are not necessarily to where they're deployed. Now, the question that arises is that, is this a fit-for-purpose appointments?
Well, I think the challenge there is, what is the role of the minister? Do the ministers really make the big decisions, or do they get the advice from their advisors?